Welcome to This Explainer. I'm really thrilled you're here because today we are diving into why the illness we all just casually call the flu is in reality a highly evolved microscopic predator. We're going to look under the hood of a virus that literally forces our own biology into a high-stakes standoff. So let's jump right in. Now, consider this. What if the illness you call the flu isn't actually the flu at all? You know how it is, it's so common for us to label pretty much any bad upper respiratory cold or a stomach bug as the flu. But true influenza, it's a completely different beast. Sure, strains of adenovirus or coronavirus can cause some really awful colds, but the actual influenza virus is locked in a continuous, high-stakes arms race with your body.
And the history of the name is actually fascinating. It comes from Latin by way of Italian, and it translates literally to influenced by. See, centuries ago, people believed that these severe yearly winter illnesses were dictated by celestial events. They thought the stars themselves were aligning to make us sick. But as we're about to see, the real culprit is much, much smaller and entirely terrestrial.
Okay, moving to Section 1, Anatomy of an Infiltrator, the Viral Spy Toolkit.
To really understand this infiltrator, we have to look at something called segmentation. Most other RNA viruses have one long, meandering genome. You can think of it like a single, long scroll of instructions. But influenza, it's different. It has 8 separate nuclear segments. And this segmentation gives the virus a terrifying shape-shifting ability. It allows for a myriad of rapid reconfigurations, meaning it can constantly create unique and dangerous new forms that our immune systems have just never seen before. So, to pull off its heist, the virus's surface is armed with 2 main tools. First up is the HA protein, or hemagglutinin. Think of this as the lockpick. It's exactly what the virus uses to firmly attach to your host cells. The second protein is NA, or neuraminidase. If HA is the lockpick, well, NA is the getaway car. It's the enzyme the virus uses to break out of the infected cell once it's finished multiplying. And this dynamic duo perfectly explains the names of strains you've definitely heard in the news, like H1N1 or H3N2. Those names, they're just a catalog of these specific lockpicks and getaway cars the virus is using.
Now, this viral toolkit constantly upgrades itself, and it does so in 2 distinct ways. On one hand, we have antigenic drift. These are the minor, nearly yearly mutations to that HA lockpick. It's the whole reason you need a new vaccine every single year. But on the other hand, we have antigenic shift. This is much less common, but is far more dangerous. Because of that 8-segment genome we just talked about, if 2 different strains enter the same host, which is often an animal like a pig, they can actually swap entire nuclear segments. This sudden, massive upgrade is what causes those devastating novel global pandemics.
Which brings us to Section 2, the cellular arms race, breaching the defenses.
Here is a seriously crazy fact for you. Influenza is naturally a bird virus. It targets the intestinal tracts of wild ducks using a very specific cellular attachment called a 2-3 linkage. But human respiratory tracts don't have that. Our cells use a 2-6 linkage. Now, to the virus, this difference is massive. For influenza to successfully breach human defenses, its HA lockpick has to mutate just enough over time to fit that human 2-6 linkage perfectly. And when it finally does, the virus successfully breaches our respiratory lining and breaks into our cells.
But hey, our bodies are not defenseless here. Once it's inside the cell, we have a highly advanced cellular alarm system waiting for it. We've got these internal sensory tripwires with very sci-fi sounding names like RIG-1 and NLRP3. These pattern recognition sensors spot the invading double-stranded viral RNA. Instantly, they sound the alarm, notifying the host cell's nucleus. And the nucleus responds by unleashing a powerful chemical called interferon. Interferon essentially rushes out to all the neighboring cells and tells them to initiate a strict neighborhood lockdown, throwing up barriers to halt the viral onslaught in its tracks.
But remember, we're talking about an arms race. The virus fully anticipates our alarm system, and it deploys a brilliant hacker tool called the NS1 protein, or non-structural protein 1. This tiny secret weapon acts as a master signal jammer. It physically covers up the viral RNA so our tripwires can't even see it, and it actively disrupts the chemical messages that were meant to trigger the interferon alarms. By jamming our signals, the virus buys itself precious time to multiply rapidly, completely undetected. In fact, strains of influenza that lack this NS1 protein, they aren't even pathogenic to us. Let's look at Section 3, Friendly Fire and Scavengers. Why you actually feel terrible. Seriously, why do we get knocked out in bed for a week when we get the flu? Well, prepare for a massive paradigm shift.
The virus doesn't actually cause your symptoms directly. It's not the virus making you totally miserable. The fever, the coughing, the awful deep muscle aches, these are all defense mechanisms. Your fever? That's a deliberate attempt by your body to heat up and optimize your own immune proteins while simultaneously slowing down the viral ones. The cough is just your body aggressively expelling the dead cells from the battlefield. And the nausea and extreme aches? That is literal friendly fire. It's collateral damage from your own immune system desperately flooding your body with inflammatory chemicals called cytokines, specifically things like interleukin-1 beta and interleukin-6, all to purge the invader. You feel terrible because your immune system is going to war.
And as you might guess, this microscopic battlefield has real consequences. Let's walk through the timeline of a lethal infection. Step 1, the influenza virus destroys the epithelial cells lining your airway. Step 2, your immune system triggers that massive inflammatory cytokine release we just discussed. But step 3 is where it gets incredibly dangerous. By destroying the lining of our airway, the virus has created a gaping, vulnerable opening for what we call secondary scavengers. See, very often, the real lethal threat isn't the influenza virus itself. It's opportunistic bacteria like staph, strep, and Haemophilus. Now, many of us carry these bacteria naturally without any issue at all. But once influenza destroys your airway defenses, these thick, slimy bacteria invade that damaged tissue and set up a severe secondary infection. When you hear of someone tragically passing away from the flu, very often it was actually a severe pneumonia caused by these secondary scavengers taking full advantage of the initial viral breach.
That takes us to Section 4, building the annual shield, the global counteroffensive. Because antiviral medications like Tamiflu often have to be given incredibly early to be effective, and honestly, because they usually just end up playing catch-up to the sheer volume of inflammation, our absolute best defense is a proactive shield. Creating the annual flu vaccine is a monumental, months-long global effort. Every single year around March, scientists globally have to predict and select target strains based on emerging data. Then, throughout the spring and summer, these exact seed strains are hybridized and actually cultivated inside millions of fertilized chicken eggs. Finally, by late fall, the harvested virus is killed with formalin and safely distributed as the vaccine. It really is an astonishing feat of global coordination.
Now, is this scientific marvel a perfect match every single year? No, of course not, because as we've learned, the virus shapeshifts and mutates incredibly fast. But it is an absolutely vital counteroffensive. Just to put it into perspective, in the United States alone, a bad flu season can claim upwards of 50,000 lives. We are talking about tens of thousands of people succumbing to either the virus itself or those secondary bacterial scavengers. So ultimately, getting vaccinated isn't just about mitigating your own symptoms or avoiding a miserable few days in bed. It is meant to provide for public health. By stopping the chain of transmission early, you activate herd immunity. You're acting as a critical shield to protect the frail and vulnerable people around you who might not survive the infection.
Knowing what we know now about this relentless biological arms race, from the 8-segment mutations and those sneaky NS1 signal jammers, all the way to the devastating friendly fire and opportunistic scavengers, the final question I want to leave you with is this. In the face of a microscopic predator that relies entirely on a chain of human infection, will you be a weak link or will you be a shield for public health? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking questions.